Jude, verse 11.
Chapter 2, verse 11.
Yeah, any chapter you want. It'll just be verse 11 from any chapter. He says, "Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the heir of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah." So we've got all of these examples he's given, and they're all different, but similar. He says, the way of Cain. So what's the way of Cain?
Murder.
Okay, let's back it up. Woe unto them. Who is the them he's referring to?
Are you referring to the Jews?
No, it'll be in the chapter.
The angel.
That's one answer.
That's verse 6. Men creeping unaware.
That's another answer.
Filthy dreamers.
Correct. Sodom and Gomorrah. So, it's false teachers. These are who he's referring to. Woe unto them, false teachers. And he's used all of those examples to point you to a false teacher. Now he's saying, woe unto them. Here's what false teachers do. They've gone in the way of Cain. So what was the way of Cain as far as a false teacher is concerned? Now, you could say that Cain did murder, and so did the guy that made the Kool-Aid. What was his name? Jim Jones. Okay, well, that's a similarity. That's murder. He was a murderer, and so he went directly 100% in the way of Cain.
You said Kool-Aid because we were talking about the Bible. I'm like, don't think about Kool-Aid. What does it mean?
Yeah, we know a few churches that would qualify. But yeah, so I mean, in an extreme case, it would be, yes, murder. But there's a more slick way that they do it.
Yeah, he brought up the wrong sacrifice.
Yeah,
He,
a bloodless sacrifice. Okay, not according to the dictates that God had laid down, and almost as though he's going to force God to accept what he's come up with. So that's what a false teacher is going to do. He's going to come up with something that's convenient and comfortable and force God to accept it and man to accept it. Of course, man will already want to accept it because it's convenient and likable. Blood isn't that likable. The heir of Balaam, what's that? What do you think that is?
Preaching for money.
Correct. Yep. Heir of Balaam. Balaam was after filthy lucre. And he did do, most of his prophecy was right on, and he obeyed most of the time, but he just couldn't shake the idea that I would give you up to half my kingdom. And he had to go back and say, can we put some fine print in that contract? Because I can get you what you really want. And he did. The heir of Balaam, Proverbs chapter 28. Proverbs 28, verse 22. It says, he that hasteth to be rich hath an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him. If your whole life is geared around, I'm going to be rich, the Bible calls it evil. And he says, what I repay for that attitude is just the opposite of what you want. I'll be sure you get poor, not rich. And look at the truly rich people. Now, there are exceptions, but by and large, the people who are rich are not happy. They're poor in spirit. They're poor in friendship. They're poor in happiness. I mean, if you don't have happiness, what good did all the money get you? they in fact get more miserly, and they start getting stingy, and they're always paranoid somebody's going to steal a dime that they made. So they would have been much better off to be poor, if it's going to turn you into that. Look at in Zechariah 11 verse 17. Zechariah 11:17. All of this is a type of the Antichrist, because it's demonic. I mean, if you're going to teach false teaching, and this is not just mistaken teaching, this is false on purpose, just like Balaam, to destroy someone. Okay, if you're going to do that, it's satanic, and it's all a picture of the devil. Well, in Proverbs, he told us that that guy had an evil eye. Not eyes, plural, but eye, singular. Okay, because the Antichrist is going to show up and have one eye. He's going to have somebody take a swipe at him with a sword or something, and he's going to lose his right eye and arm. They're going to be clean dried up, is what the Bible calls it. Zechariah 11:17. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. That's the Antichrist. It didn't say an idle shepherd. It's the idle shepherd. There's a specific one. The sword shall be upon his arm, and his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. That's the evil eye. The one eye he's got left is evil. If the light that be in you be darkness, how great is that darkness? There it is. 2 Peter 2. 2 Peter 2 verse 15. 2 Peter 2:15, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. That's money. Everything, there's profit in everything you do. Now the profit may be you learn to never do that job again. Okay, that's profitable if you learn something from it. Okay, well, there's some profit to everything. The wage, the payment. Now, the wage they want and the wage they're going after is unrighteousness. And unrighteousness seems to appeal to the flesh. Righteousness does not appeal to the flesh. So if you'll force your focus to be, everything should be heading toward righteousness. God, is this righteous? Will this be holy? Then you'll be able to steer away from the wage of Balaam, or at least identify it. When you've got a choice, okay, which one's righteous and which one is not. If you can't decide that, which one is more righteous? Go that way. Okay, so the Balaam found the way to curse Israel by circumventing the fine print there. Numbers 31, verse 16. Numbers 31:16. Jude, of course, we've seen it with the reference to Michael and disputing over the body of Moses. That's an advanced revelation. You don't really have evidence of what Balaam did until you get to 2 Peter and Jude. 2 Peter, he clearly tells you he did it for filthy lucre, for wages of unrighteousness. Here he says, Numbers 31:16, behold, these cursed the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. You don't find in the story of Balaam where he does this. You have to surmise it. Now, you've been given enough clues throughout the rest of the Bible to put the pieces together. But as far as him giving prophecy, you don't see him go in and say, I'll tell you how to curse Israel. You've got to put the pieces together and figure it out. We assume he collected, because that was the whole point of it. The appealing thing to the flesh, that he knew how to get to Balaam.
Well,
Oh no, I don't think so. No. He does. He gets killed with the king.
Yeah, so it's like he gets killed.
Mhm. Numbers 24. Numbers 24 verse 10. And Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he smote his hands together. And Balak said unto Balaam, I call thee to curse mine enemy, and behold, thou hast altogether blessed them these 3 times. So his message wasn't all bad. Matter of fact, it was mostly good. Verse 11. Therefore now flee thou to thy place. I thought to promote thee unto great honor. But lo, the Lord hath kept thee back from honor. Yeah, the kind of honor that you can get that's not from the Lord ain't worth having. Verse 12. And Balaam said to Balak, Spake I not to the messengers which thou sent unto me, saying, If Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the command of the Lord to do either good or bad of mine own hand. But what the Lord saith, that will I speak. Okay? He said right there, I'm going to be a true prophet. What God tells me, I'm going to do. Let's find out. Verse 9. Numbers 24:9. He couched, he lay down as a lion, as a great lion, who shall stir him up? This is Judah. Blessed is he that blesseth thee, and cursed is he that curseth thee. Does he not realize what he just said? He said, if you curse Judah, you will be cursed. He laid the curse on himself out of his own mouth. He's going to tell Balak how he can curse Israel by providing women to go into the camp. That's called Baal Peor if you read that story. And sure enough, it becomes his demise. He gets killed along with the king later on in the book. The Era of Balaam, of course, is twofold. There's the way of Balaam. We've talked about that. He loved wages. That's money, going after what he can put in his pocket. And we know that the false teacher does that too. Paul talks about that. He says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. Now, when he's saying that, he's not just making it a blanket statement. He has a reason for saying it. Watch out. Don't be trying to be like the religious fakers, the Sadducees and Pharisees and all that. That's what they did. They made a good living at it. He says, while some coveted after have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. They said even in his day what was going on was people knew the truth. But money got a little more popular in their mind. Therefore they were willing to tweak their message to bring in a better offering. That needs to be preached. Okay, there's not only the way of Balaam, the error of Balaam, there's the doctrine of Balaam. Revelation 2, verse 14. Revelation 2:14. But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit fornication. Okay, so the doctrine is you can participate in the devil's programs and call it spiritual. We'll do the same thing the world's doing and we'll consider it spiritual. So if they got a strobe club at the nightclub, they got a strobe light and, wild blaring music, let's bring it to the church and do it there. I mean, we'll call it spiritual. I mean, the words are good. I assume if anybody could hear the words, but supposedly the words are going to be good. Not that anybody can hear them. Okay, they've created the atmosphere of the world and brought it into the church. That's the doctrine of Balaam. He taught them to sacrifice to idols and to commit fornication. Look at it in verse 20. Revelation 2:20. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach, and to seduce my servants to commit fornication, and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. Now we've got Jezebel doing the same thing. Jezebel's following suit. They're both teaching the same doctrine. Worship an idol and commit fornication. Well, there is a big religious organization that does this on a regular basis. The Catholics. They have many idols. They want you to literally worship an idol. And they do what they call a sacrifice. That's the little wafer that's supposed to be the body. They think it's literally the body of Jesus Christ. So they're sacrificing him afresh every time they do the Mass. It's called a Mass, as in massacre. And so they're doing it. I mean, they're fulfilling it to the T. Look at Hebrews 10. Hebrews 10 verse 8. They don't quote this at the Roman Catholic Church. Hebrews 10:8. Above, when he said, sacrifice and offering and burnt offerings and offering for sin, thou wouldest not, neither hadst pleasure therein, which are offered by the law. Then said he, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He taketh away the first, that he may establish the second. By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all, not every Mass day. Verse 11. And every priest, like you find in the Catholic Church, standeth daily ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sin. It's a futile practice. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sin forever, sat down on the right hand of God. You doing something he couldn't do? I don't think so. Okay, so the Catholic is a doctrine of Jezebel. And the same thing is being taught by Balaam. That's the doctrine of Balaam. Zechariah 11:17. Zechariah 11:17. Woe to the idle shepherd that leadeth the flock. Okay, a shepherd is someone who's guiding and gets them to the water, gets them to the pasture. That's what people think the priest is doing for them in the Catholic Church. But it's not limited to Catholics. The Mormons are doing it. You name any cult, they're doing it. They've got a following that they're teaching a doctrine to. So let's not just limit it to Catholics. Catholics are blatant about it. We can identify it quickly. But so can you apply it to how he started out? Somebody who's doing it for filthy lucre. There's all part and parcel of the same doctrine. Revelation 13:3. Revelation 13:3. We'll find the idle shepherd. Revelation 13:3. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Okay, this is the Antichrist. Over and over you find the Antichrist in type throughout the Bible. Now, we don't make a type out of something that we imagine. You have to have a clear scripture on it before you make a type, because we could make types out of anything we wanted to and claim. You don't make the type the doctrine. You have the doctrine first and then find the type. Saul? Okay, how is Saul? How is Saul a type?
He started out really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I know you want 70 scriptures, and I just remember the teaching that David is a type of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and Saul was a type of Antichrist,
Mm-hmm.
because he was always out to kill God's anointed.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Goliath, of course. How does Goliath get killed? It's a headshot.
He got stoned.
A headshot. One of his heads what we read in Revelation 13:3, one of his heads were, as it were, wounded to death. Okay, he gets a head wound. Who's another one that gets a head wound? That's a type of the Antichrist. Cain.
He gets some mark.
No, we don't know how Cain dies. Find it. Revelation, find it. Revelation chapter, not Revelation, that'll be in Genesis chapter 3.
He gets some marks on his forehead. He doesn't get. No, he gets a mark. So the way will go in. God told him, he said, I'm going to kill him. I'll put a mark on him so he's going to kill him.
You don't know where that is, though.
No, we don't know what it is.
Sisera? Sisera, Jael put a nail through his head. He was against Israel. You know another one.
I'm starting to say Caesar, but they stole him.
He was good, not bad.
Yeah.
He doesn't typify Antichrist. How about Eli? Falls over backwards, breaks his neck. The lamp's gone out. He's allowing his children to get away with wickedness and actual fornication. See if I got any more here. Abimelech. You got Absalom. Over and over you find these. So what'd you find? Okay, does Lamech tell us how he died in that chapter? Lamech. Go to chapter 4 maybe. Yeah, chapter 4. Lamech says, if Cain shall be avenged
7 times, he wants to be avenged 70.
times 7. Or, yeah. So, do we find any? That's as close as we get to hearing about Cain dying. And even there it's not saying he died.
Verse 24. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold.
Yep, we don't find his death anywhere.
That would be a flood.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think it ever says how he died.
That's a good hunt. Had to figure that one out. I don't think we get the information on it. I don't think we're told. But as far as a mark, he's given a mark. We don't know where it is. We don't know what it is. It's obviously not the mark of the beast, because there, the mark of the beast kills you, doesn't make you invincible. Cain's mark was so that no one would kill him. But in the most elementary sense, you could say he got a mark, and the Antichrist gives a mark. I don't know that the Antichrist receives a mark. He's the giver of the mark. You could probably put Cain in as a type of the population that receives the mark. They're against God. Sin lies at the door and they accept it. And they run from the presence of the Lord and accept the mark. Okay, the next thing in our verse, in chapter 1, verse 11, Jude 1:11, he talked about Korah, the heir of Balaam, and well, I turned the page. Let's see. They've gone in the way of Cain and run greedily after the heir of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. So what's this gainsaying of Korah? The gainsaying, that is real similar to what we've already seen. Saying something for gain. I'm going to get something out of what I say. I have a motive behind it. When we preach, we don't have a motive behind it. The motive is God tell me what to say, and you've already said it. I'm just going to read it out. And preaching is, people have this mixed up. Preaching is not anything that you've not already seen. I'm not here to tell you some new thing. You've already read it 100 times. All I do is reconfirm what you already know. And you've already seen it 100 times, I would hope. I mean, we've all read the Bible through many times and still doing it. So I can't tell you a new story. It's like, they used to say, what are they going to do for the Christmas pageant? Well, there's only one story. What do you mean, what are they going to do? How are they going to come up with a new one? Okay, Korah. He's going to illustrate this self-appointed false teacher. He wants to oppose God's ordained minister, Moses and Aaron, and he's going to be up there and he's going to lead the crowd, and he's jealous because he thinks they have something that he wants.
So this is the same Korah spelled with a K in the Old Testament?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
It's not just limited to him, but he died and was made a public display for anybody who wanted to do it in the future. Well, anybody who followed him. Not his family, but anybody who followed him.
250
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all that appertaineth to Korah. Now, the appertaineth there is, I don't believe, his family, because we find them again in 2 Chronicles, part of the porters. So, obviously, his descendants did survive. So, what appertaineth to him was the 250 followers he called to himself. Okay, so he's going to illustrate these false leaders that rebel against God's plan. We find this going on all the time. God has laid down for our dispensation his plan. The way I would be like Korah is if I were to say, you don't understand God's plan. It's not by grace through faith, it's by works. How many of you have sacrificed your lamb this year? Okay, then you've not followed the Bible, and I'll give you 70 scriptures to prove it. Okay, now I'll build a following off of something that's not part of God's plan. That's exactly what Korah's doing. Of course, Jannes and Jambres did the same thing withstanding Moses before they even got into the wilderness. The magicians. Okay, we can mimic what you're doing. Yeah, worked real well, didn't it? 2 Peter 2. Second Peter 2, verse 1. Here's how you can begin to start identifying them. 2 Peter is almost a Jude is almost a Cliff Notes of 2 Peter. 2 Peter discusses many of the things Jude talks about. 2 Peter 2, verse 1. But there are false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privately shall bring in damnable heresies. That's those men who are creeping in unawares, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. Easy way to identify them. Verse 2, and many shall follow their pernicious ways. They're going to have the megachurch. And not just the church, but the following. You know, it's going to appeal to the flesh. What appeals to the flesh grows a big flesh crowd. What appeals to the spirit is few and far between. Here and there, God sprinkles them. He says, verse 3, and through covetousness shall they with vain words make merchandise of you. So they want people to covet. Covet this and covet that. And the way I'm picking on the charismatics, but I mean, they're blatant about it. The way they start the covetousness thing is, do you want God to bless you? Then sow a seed. Okay, why are we doing this? For righteousness' sake? What? Getting holy? Having more fruit of the Spirit? No, because you want more money. So you give me money and you get more money? Okay, you're not giving it to God for God. You're giving it for your bank account. Okay, it's wrong.
Lord, so I can tithe.
Yeah, and there you go. So the Baptist take on that is you owe God a 10%. And if you haven't done a 10%, you have robbed God, according to... That's right. You've robbed God according to Malachi 3. And they go down the same line, but just a little different. They put you back under the law. Okay, that's these false teachers and Korah. They're trying to do this stuff for gain. You know what godliness is? Godliness does not appear to be gain. Not earthly gain. It appears to be eternal gain. And when you see the difference in eternal gain versus temporal gain, one so far outshines the other that unless the devil is blinding you, you don't focus on the temporal. Because you can see the temporal is about to burn up. It's not going to be here long, and you ain't going to be here long. But the eternal is just that, eternal. Let's go for that one. It would be like this. If I said I can give you a stock, and this stock will gain interest. It's going to triple in interest tomorrow. But then it's going to bottom out the next day. Well, that might appeal to some people. They're called day traders. They trade for a day. That's this world. But wouldn't it be better if I told you, I can give you a stock that's going to earn 0.5% of interest from now forever? Well, I think that one would be a better investment, wouldn't it? Yeah, okay. Well, that's the difference in the temporal versus the eternal. Jude chapter 1, verse 12. Jude 1, verse 12. He keeps referring to this same group of people. Remember how Jude began. He said, something hit me. I sat down to write you, and as I was about to write, God said, hey, buddy, I got a different message. He says, verse 3, Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered to the saints. He said, my message changed. I started out, I had it all plotted out. I had my chapter headings and everything. He did the message the way, when you go to, y'all don't care about this. When you go to seminary, they tell you hermeneutics and homiletics. Those are 2 courses you take that tells you how to produce a message. I don't know how people do that because I can't do it the way they say to do it. You're supposed to have a title, a theme, your points, your subpoints. Well, I guess I've still got that wrong. You're supposed to have an introduction. I mean, it's all supposed to be laid out, your conclusion, and your illustrations, and all that stuff. I can't do that. Okay, that's you dictating to God what he's got to say. And it didn't work that way. I work it backwards.
Still failing the course?
Along with Greek.
I threw Greek out the window. I did that. I tried Greek 3 times. I said 3 strikes and you're out. Drop that one.
That was your thorn in the flesh.
That's right. Yeah, I know a little Greek, and it's called Phaner's Brothers.
Yeah.
Right on.
That's right. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so what they do is they say you've got to have this pretty little outline, and you're supposed to be smart enough to come up with this thing. I can't do that. Now, I understand there's some great men who do, and whatever. You do what God tells you to do. I just read the Bible, and when God says, hey, look at that phrase right there, I say, okay. He says, look at that one. Okay. Write that down. And then I just work on it all day long. And then he tells me, you can call that this, and you can call that this. He said, here's your conclusion. Here's how all that works together. And then when it's all done, I don't think he has any part of this. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. When it's all done, I sit back and I think, what do we call that? That's the title. But that's this whole thing of, I've got to decide what I'm going to write. You start doing that, God will tell you, you ain't. That's what Jude did. He said, I sat down, I had this whole plan. I was going to write to you about the common salvation. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was stressed to me. It's needful for me to write and tell you, you better earnestly contend for the faith. So that's what this book is about, is there's a contention. You don't have contention unless you have two opposing sides. The opposing side in this book is the false teacher. Verse 12. The first word tells you that we're still talking about the same subject. These, the false teachers, are spots in your feasts of charity, when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds are they without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. You ever seen something twice dead? Maybe some refried beans. You fried it once, it's dead, and then you fry it again, it's twice dead. Hey, right.
And then you technically cook them again naturally.
The word these tells you that he's referring to the same subject. These blind teachers, false teachers, they've entered sneakily. They snuck in on purpose. Now there's a difference between sneaking in or just walking in and not knowing what's being taught. There's nothing wrong with that. You would walk in to learn. And the Bible's not against that, it's for that. These people snuck in because they intend to do the teaching. We've seen that before. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? They snuck in, and their intent is to control and to change. Okay? They didn't come in to learn, they came in to do the teaching. Matthew chapter 23. Matthew 23:16. You know we're in Matthew chapter 23. It's a hot chapter. This is Jesus' anger phase. He was mad at the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians, and he just unloaded double barrel right here. Verse 16. Woe unto you, you blind guides, which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. Start talking about money, they get serious. They're blind. Jesus said they're blind. False teachers. Verse 24. Ye blind guides, which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Okay, so we have to be careful with this one. It's easy for us to strain at gnats. We find a pet doctrine. Okay, it may be there. For instance, Genesis chapter 6. I know what that is. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me, but I know what that is. That's the sons of God being angelic hosts coming down to the daughters of men. I understand that. Well, a lot of people wouldn't agree with that. However, that's a minute gnat when compared to something that will damn your soul forever. So what we should stress more than the proper exegesis of Genesis chapter 6 should be the proper explanation of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. This is the gospel. Okay, so there is an order to things and a priority. He says you can get that thing out of order. You strain at a gnat, swallow a camel. And that's not the kind you smoke. Daniel chapter 12.
So would the camel be tithing?
Well, in that passage,
I mean,
no.
Because see, they don't have, they're straining at the gnat about the sons of God.
Mm-hmm.
They're swallowing this tithing thing, which has
Yeah, that would work. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for bearing with me. Carry on.
Daniel 12:10. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall, what's that word? Understand. But the wise shall understand. I realize that it's natural to be honest sometimes. And when you read the Bible, you'll come across something that has not clicked yet. But don't tell off on yourself. Don't say, I don't understand that. You've just identified with a crowd. The crowd that does not understand, the Bible calls the wicked crowd. Oof. Now, we can say, I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, exactly. Jesus is still working on that.
That's right. He said in the end times, there's going to be people who cannot, impossible for them to understand. Why? Because they're following blind guides. When the blind lead the blind, they all fall in the same ditch. Okay? So there it is. In the end time, it's going to be, and now I believe that in the end times, he's going to give supernatural ability to understand spiritual things. Because they've only got 7 years. They don't have 40 years to build up a Bible understanding. He's going to dump it out like never before, if you're willing to receive. He says, knowledge shall increase. It will, right there. However, if you're going to follow wickedness, the wickedness is overpowering. Darkness like this world has never seen. Psalm chapter 92. Psalm 92 verse 6. Another encouraging thing here is to identify yourself with the crowd that doesn't understand, or the crowd that what God says about them. Psalm 92 verse 6. A brutish man knoweth not, neither doth a fool understand this. That's right. The brute, brutish, or the fool. If you don't have understanding, you fit in that category. Now, I mean, let's be honest. We've all fit in that category many times. Okay, God's still working on us. We've got fool and brute built into the flesh. God's working on beating it out of us. Okay, we're there. Isaiah 29. Isaiah 29:14. This is what God does. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder, for the wisdom of their wise men shall perish. That's not the marvel we wanted. He means you're going to look at that and wonder, how are they so stupid? Now, just everyday, average Joe Christian, or Christian, reads his Bible and gets an understanding of certain things. And he turns on the radio and he listens to Mr. Popular Christian Celebrity, and he says something that Joe Christian says, that's not right. I've read that 100 times. And Joe Christian says, how can he not understand that? That's a marvelous work. Now you're marveling at it. God blinded them. A marvelous work. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. That's God. He sends strong delusion. That's one of his things that he does. He dilutes people's mind. In 1 Corinthians 1:19, he says, for as it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. That's the way God talks. That's not man talking. That's not Paul praying for it. That's God saying, I do this. And we'll pick up with the spots. I still hadn't made it to the spots in that verse yet. We'll pick up with the spots next time.